The skeletal system. The supporting structure of the body is the framework of joined bones that we refer to as the skeleton. It enables us to stand erect, to move in our environment, to accomplish extraordinary feats of artistic grace like ballet moves and athletic endeavors like the high jump, as well as normal physical endurance. The skeleton of a developing fetus is completely formed by the end of the 3rd month of pregnancy. However, at this time, the skeleton is predominantly cartilage. During the subsequent months of pregnancy, ossification, the formation of bone, and growth occur. The osteoblasts invade the cartilage and begin the process of ossification. Longitudinal growth of bones continues until approximately 15 years of age in girls and 16 years of age in boys. This takes place at the epiphyseal line or plate. Bone maturation and remodeling continue until the age of 21 in both sexes. It would be incorrect to state that cartilage actually turns into bone. Rather, cartilage is the environment in which the bone develops. In this figure, the structure of a typical long bone. A. Diaphyses, epiphysis, and medullary cavity. B. Compact bone surrounding yellow bone marrow in the medullary cavity. C. Spongy bone and compact bone in the epiphysis. Bone develops from spindle-shaped cells called osteoblasts that develop from undifferentiated bone cells called osteoprogenitor cells. These osteoblasts are formed beneath the fibrovascular membrane that covers a bone called the periosteum. These osteoblasts are also found in the endosteum, which lines the bone marrow or medullary cavity. Deposition of bone is controlled by the amount of strain or pressure on the bone. There are 2 types of bone tissue: compact or dense bone and cancellous or spongy bone. In both types of tissue, the osteocytes are the same, but the arrangement of how the blood supply reaches the bone cells is different. The 2 types of tissue have different functions. Compact bone is dense and strong.
Any type of break in your bone, whether or not it's a small little hairline crack or a complete shattering of the bone. Fracture is sort of the general term that's used for this. Your body is typically able to repair fractures. However, it's best to go to a doctor, because if the bone isn't set right, meaning if it breaks into 2 pieces and those pieces aren't kind of aligned properly, it will heal. It just won't heal properly, and you can have some really deformed bones. If it heals so improperly that it becomes a health risk, sometimes doctors will even re-break your bone to then set it back again properly. So it's definitely worth going to a doctor over. Now, as always, there's all sorts of different terms that you need to learn that deal with the different types of fractures. For instance, if you went to a doctor's office and they said, okay, you have a fracture, well, that's great. That means you know you have some kind of break to your bone. But what type of break specifically? Is your bone broken into 2 separate pieces? Is it just a little cracked? Is it sticking out of your skin? Although my guess is you would know that when you went into the doctor. Is it shattered? Did it twist when it broke? Right, and so these are different terms that kind of help describe that. The first one is simple, so a simple fracture. This is a type of fracture that does not break through the skin. The counter to this type of fracture is called a compound fracture. Compound fractures, actually, the bone will break through the skin. It's pretty disturbing when you see it. The next 2 are actually kind of another pair, sort of opposites or counters to one another. The first one is a complete fracture. And this describes when a bone is broken into 2 distinct different parts, right? It's completely broken, if you will, a complete fracture. And the counter to that is a partial fracture. there's some sort of break, but it's not into two distinct parts. So a lot of times this is where your hairline fractures or things like that will come into play. Alright, continuing on, the next type of fracture is called an impacted fracture. And this is when the broken ends of the bone are sort of wedged together or slammed together. A lot of times this is due to some sort of blunt force, most often seen with things like car accidents. If you rear end somebody and your feet are stretched out in like the passenger seat, they might get impacted into one another where they're sort of forced into each other. Comminuted, right? This is basically a shattering of the bone, when your bone is broken into many different fragments or pieces. And the final type of fracture that we're going over is a spiral fracture. This fracture is most often associated with sports injuries. If you think about an athlete who's maybe making a fast break or taking a quick switch of direction, and so they have all their weight, all their momentum, all their force going in this circular direction. They have a little bit of torque on their body, and their body keeps going, and their bones twist, and just twist to the point so much torque and pressure is behind it that the bone itself actually twists itself broken.